I work with Pratham, and I also head the ASSER Center. ASSER Center is the Research Assessment Evaluation Survey arm of Pratham. And one of the things that the ASSER Center is known for is doing this ASSER report every year, which is the Annual Status of Education report. The fundamental belief that we have is, for a widespread discussion on learning, there have to be things that people get started on. You can move to much more higher level, sophisticated things. But just to get the discussion started, particularly with illiterate or parents who have not been to school very much, there needs to be a starting point. I don't believe that any education can improve without parents. And we have, at least from our last year's estimate, especially in North India, 60 to 70% mothers of school-going children who have not been to school themselves or have had 1 or 2 very indifferent years in school where they certainly didn't learn very much. And therefore, what are methods in which we can carry everybody along? What are measures that can be used? And how can this all be brought to a fruitful discussion at the level at which this is being done for some action to be taken forward? What led eventually around 2005 to ASSER? The macro scenario, I think, was important. One is that there was a new government. There was a lot of talk. I think the education cess started around this time. There was a lot of talk about outlays to outcomes. Money was being put aside. And yet there wasn't anything new that was coming out of the government other than on enrollment numbers and input-related measurement. And we had an annual planning process which was supposed to be at every district level, into which district level variations of what to do in the schools could be brought in. And so that's when we decided that if in our experience, we feel that this kind of an approach has helped more people start thinking about learning, more discussions on what learning well may mean, what learning may mean, what learning well may mean, that it needs to be spread out far more just to get more people thinking about our next generation issues. I don't think these are next generation issues. It's just that as a very large body, we have focused on getting the basic inputs in place for a long time. Always people have been worried about learning, but I would say at the macro policy level, the focus on getting inputs in place has been much more strong than anything else. I think my view is that assessments are necessary, whether it's on large scale or small scale, but wherever you're actually going to do work, you need to know where you're beginning, you need to know where you're headed, and finding out where you're in the beginning should help you structure what it is that you need to do to get to wherever you're headed. And so whether it is for a school or whether it is for a whole school system, some goals need to be set. In this case, we are talking in education about learning goals. So as we set whatever the learning goals are, and by we, it would have to be whoever is going to do the action on it, you need to figure out where children are or teachers are when we begin. And therefore, I think assessment is an integral part of the action that follows, and is an integral part of reviewing what needs to be done next. So I do think that there is, unless you do some measurement, it's difficult for you to know whether things are changing, going backwards, forwards, or staying the same. So I can talk about the large-scale assessment that we do. It's called ASSER, the Annual Status of Education report. And it is done in every district in India, every rural district in India every year for the last, now this is going to be the 8th year. It's a very simple exercise. What we do is we ask 2 simple questions. Are children in school and are they learning? And for the learning, the way we've defined learning is to say, can children read? Some very basic sentences, words, a short story. And can you do simple math? And the math, I think mathematical understanding has many, many dimensions. We do a very simple version of can you do subtraction, can you do division, can you recognize numbers? Now, the history of why we do this is because there are several reasons. One is that India, not today, but even for the last 5-6 years, has had very high enrollment. So much of our focus, both at the local level as well as at the macro level, has been on building schools, getting teachers. And while we can still do better on teacher quality or building quality, a lot of the basic inputs are now in place. And the time has come for us to think about what all this, the reason our children go to school is because we want some capability to be added to them, some ability, capability to be added to them. And so we need to start focusing our attention on what are children learning. India has some amount of learning measurement that goes on, but for a national level, it is quite periodic. We plan for each district in the country, but we don't have information for every district in the country. We also, for the last, I think, from 2005 onwards, since the UPA government first came into place, they talked about outlays to outcomes. So we seem to be doing a lot of measurement on whether outlays are leading to inputs, but not enough. The government doesn't produce anything which lets us know. The government produces information which tells us our children in school, but not about whether they are learning. So it's a very large citizens' effort. ASR is done every year, and the idea behind ASR is to really put learning at the center of the stage. We feel the group that you work with, the class, the village, the hamlet, whatever is the unit at which I want to make something happen, is a scale at which I should do this. If it is a village, then obviously I should do every child, because I don't want to do a sample of kids improving in a village. And in a village, by the time you do a sample, you may as well do the whole village. If I do it at the block level, which we haven't done, but sometimes the government does do, so those decisions can be made later. Well, I think this is the largest assessment that goes on in India. 7 lakh children every year, every single rural district. We do some, what I would call more research studies, in which are also quite large. The last one we did covered about 30,000 kids over 2 years. But that was more trying to understand sort of the progression of kids through the school system. And look at children's learning and teachers teaching in the context of the school, the class, the larger environment within which this happens. ASR is a very thin slice which doesn't try to explain things. It's more like a thermometer which just really measures very basic things. We know education is far more than that. But the ASR is done mainly to get people thinking, going. The tools are very simple. So apart from the data that we collect, we hope that very simple tools like this can be used on large scale, because we need parents, teachers and children to kind of focus on where we are headed. I mean, there's a lot of debate on whether ASR is a good thing or a bad thing. And I think that's very good, because from our point of view, I think it's fantastic that you either hate it or you love it. Nobody's neutral. And if you want to get something as an agenda in a much bigger public space, whether it's in government or in families, I think we've achieved that. As far as policy goes, it's hard to trace who influenced what and why something became policy. But I would say that efforts like ASR, and especially because they are done on such large scale year after year, have kind of influenced the bringing of this learning agenda to much more central space than it was earlier. But that's not the point. The point is that we would like across the country every parent to engage in children's learning, every teacher to figure where children are headed, and for children also to feel that they're making progress. And we hope that efforts like ASR are helping all of this kind of move forward.